The only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. Vince Lombardi, American professional football coach. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. And I want to quickly apologize for the delay this morning. I was having a technical issue and had to restart all of my equipment, which takes a few moments. But thank you for hanging in there. All right. Who knew that I would grow up to bear the same attitude as was expressed to me when I was young? Back in my day, it was, well, back in my day, adults, especially grandparents, loved to revel in stories about great feats they accomplished as kids just to do what was completely normal for me. Back in my day, I walked 6 miles up and down hills in the snow just to get to school. And when I got home, it was homework and chores. You kids have it easy. Well, now I'm the old. But instead of back in my day, I revel in stop whining and figure it out. Today, I am talking employment and once again, the intergenerational wars over it. To kick off the topic, let's look at this graphic showing birth years for various generations, just to get a sense of what these generations, what our different generations are like. So here on this graph, it shows it's a timeline, and it shows that Generation Z is currently roughly between the ages of 9 and 24, millennials between 25 and 40, Generation X ages 41 to 56, baby boomers 57 to 75, and the silent generation 76 to 93. I'm sure most of them are probably silent. Wah, wah. Okay. Sorry, that was a bad joke. All right. Now this depending on what you look at will depend on the generations. So, but this is fairly accurate, right? And I don't know how old this particular graphic was. So their ages may be a little off today, but that's okay. Um, I fall squarely in Generation X. I was born in 1978. So I am the generation that when the millennials and the boomers were having it out, nobody remembered, which is cool because I was also the latchkey generation, which means nobody paid attention to me. It's like you come home and you lock the door and you throw on some television or whatever, you're watching MTV, whatever. But I basically, like, my generation, Generation X, practically raised themselves. We did a lot. We were taught to be self-sufficient by simply having to do it ourselves. That was our teaching. Here you go, figure it out. All right. So that's the generations graph, just to kind of set the tone for today's conversation. Now, how did I come across this topic? As usual, it was on social media. Now, you might have seen, if you follow me on Twitter, which you should be, Liberty Dad Pod. Go find me on Twitter. If you are following me, you might have seen that yesterday I seemed kind of excited to when I posted that I was going to talk about the red dye number 3 ban from the FDA. That was my initial topic of choice this morning. However, doing a deep dive, I was like, man, I don't know if I can do justice on this with just less than a day to prepare. And so I was kind of like, have I spoken too soon on this? And then I saw the conversations going around about getting a job. And I was like, you know what? It's time actually for another Liberty Dad memoir. I haven't done one in a while. So this would be a good opportunity to chime in. And so here's what brought it to my attention in the first place. So this person's name is Christopher Rufo. He's an activist, and disregard the first sentence. He's in a conversation, and so he's talking about something else. But this is what kicked things off, as far as I can tell. He goes, "The Panda Express near my house is offering $70,000 per year plus benefits for the assistant manager. You can make 100K a year working at Chipotle for a few years and working up to store manager." And boy, did that set off some people. So let's take a look at some of those comments, how people responded to Mr. Rufo here. So here we go. All right. So we've got boomers. First of all, Rufo is not a boomer. He's actually younger than I am. He's like 40. So like he might have just made it in when it comes to Gen X. So, but anyway, boomers, go to college and get a degree so you're not stuck flipping burgers. Boomers, 20 years later, oops, sorry, we replaced your entire field with immigrants because they're cheaper. But why don't you go flip burgers instead? Hmm. Okay. When right wing journalists pivot from, quote, learn to code to, quote, apply to fast food, you know we're screwed. Normie conservatives are constantly trying to pull the wool over your eyes, saying, you think working 80 hours a week at a fast food joint is beneath you? Yeah, actually it is. I won't debase myself by competing with Rajesh, who has zero self respect and will work for $2 a day. Hmm, interesting. Let's see what else we got. It's hilarious how in 25 years, young men went from being told, get good grades so you can go to college and get a good job, to don't go to college, be like Mike Rowe, to stop bitching. You can get a job paying 70,000 at Panda Express or else we're replacing you. Wasn't so long ago, Con Inc., that's Conservative Incorporated, people would say that fast food was never meant to be a career and paying them $20 an hour was absurd. Now it's noble. Actually, that's not really what they said. I was a conservative back in those days. And what they actually said was that working at a fast food place should not be beneath you. It's also not meant to be a career. When people were saying things like, hey, this 40-year-old can't, feed his family by working at McDonald's. And that's when Conservative Inc., if you will, was saying, well, you're not supposed to be working there when you're 40. You're supposed to start out there when you're young, and then you acquire workplace skills. And then you go on and you take those skills with you and you apply to other jobs. Maybe it's within the same place and you become the manager, and then maybe a district manager and so on and so forth. Or maybe you take them and you go elsewhere to a new job. That's what they were actually saying there, JG. All right, let's see what else. American jobs or American kids should work in fast food while immigrants take high paying jobs. Chris Rufo, America First. This is so funny. I'm finding this amusing. Hi, Chris. I have a master's in computer science. And if I get laid off, I'll get locked out of my industry by cheaper foreign replacements. Should I just go learn to wrap burritos to support my family? Well, you do what you have to do. That's always been my attitude. You do what you got to do. I'm 48. I'll be 48 this year. I promise you. If I get laid off and the only job that's hiring is Chipotle wrapping burritos, you can best believe I'll be there. Because you know what's worse than working at some quote unquote lowly burrito wrapping job? Not having money at all to pay your family or to pay your bills for your family. That's what's worse. All right. Let's see what else we got. Learn to code, learn a trade, work at Panda Express. Yes, yes, and yes. If you do all of those, guess what that makes you? More employable. Because if you can code and you have a trade and you're on rough times, but you're willing to work at Panda Express, then you're maintaining some employment. Employers love that. They don't like to see gaps in your resume, right? And if you come to them and you say, hey, I've learned this new skill, it's always a plus. All right. I'm going to be real with you, dog. This is the type of shit that gets you executed when the real right or far left take power. Take power. Wow, Josh. Took that to another level, didn't you? Goodness gracious. Don't worry, we exported all of your manufacturing jobs to Mexico and China, told you to learn to code. Now we have high skilled immigrants to do the coding, but you can still get a good job at Panda Express. Stop complaining. Yeah, basically, that's how it works. Who's that? Boston Mom? Yes. Yes, Mom, that's how it works. As a dad, I have to be honest, that's how it works. Okay. So that's some of the response. There was tons of responses like that. So a lot of times when a tweet goes viral, it's like the original post. This one was actually like a couple, it was nested down. It was a couple responses down. And this is the one that stirred it up. Like people got pretty angry about this. And who can remember this charming viral TikTok video that went around, I don't know, 8 months ago? I'm not sure exactly. I think this young lady's name was Kat. If I can play it.
Can anyone explain to me how I have 2 degrees? I have 2 degrees. Oh, and a certificate. A little extra, right? I have a certificate. May not be a master's, but it's something extra along with the 2 degrees, you know? I'm trying to apply for jobs right now, and the thing is that the only person I have responding to me is a man from a tech company saying, "Hey, you want to answer some customer service problems? You want to answer some customer service calls?" No, Bart, I don't want to answer your calls. No, no offense, but I'm a little more qualified than to be sitting around answering your customer service calls, Bart. Okay, I'm sorry, but Bart is the only one who's responding to me. So what am I supposed to do? And I'm looking down at these and I'm looking at them and I'm kind of wondering. I'm like, what was this for again? Oh, I don't know.
Young lady, let me tell you something. Again, I'm 48. Okay. I'm established at this point. I have a career. I've got side hustles. I've got things going on. But if things happen to me and Bart says, hey, man, you want to answer some phone calls? I don't know. What should I choose? Feed my family or cry on TikTok? I don't know. Okay. It's very terrible falsetto. Very terrible. I should probably never do that again. And look, I sympathize with the young people, okay? I'm not just mocking them, but a little bit because I'm Gen X. And you know what? We just don't care. Like we have a different attitude. I saw a meme the other day and it was like, look, I don't mess with anybody that's over 42. It was like it said they're just built different. By the time they were 9, they could do all these things, blah, 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 cook, clean, blah, blah. And I'm like, yep, 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 yep. Like Gen X is built different. And so most of us are probably not going to give you very much sympathy. But more so, here's the real question. Like you might be asking like DL, but weren't, can't you be a little sympathetic to people like this young lady? I mean, once upon a time, you were young once, right? Like, don't you remember? And as it turns out, yes, I do remember. I got stories upon stories. But before we get into some life stories, that explains why I'm the way I am, more than just saying, hey, look, I'm Gen X. I don't care. Half my favorite musicians died when they were 27, right? Before I get, but more than that, let's look at some comments here real quick. Let's take a little bit of a quick break to look at some comments, and then we'll get back to the show here. So, bam, comments right there. Let's take a look. Let me see here. Where's my other screen here? Boom, there we go. All right. Let's see here. That Liberty Lady says, follow Liberty Dad on X Twitter at Liberty Dad Pod. Yes, go follow me on the Twitter. I post way too often, so you should always be entertained. Let's see what else. Uh, I can never say this name. You know what? If you're gonna have a difficult name to pronounce or one that you think might be difficult, just every great once in a while, I'll be like, "Hey, it's this," and throw me a pronunciation guide in there. Otherwise, I'm just gonna butcher it. And if you don't mind butchering it, then that's fine. But I swear, I promise, I'm doing my best here, folks. Kagela says it's good to be old. Yes, I enjoy it. I am enjoying life because guess what? I don't get to go back. So my only option is to cry about it or enjoy it. So I'm doing my best to enjoy it. I need a new job in that light. Okay, well, oh, good luck. Uh, I too thought a master's degree in computer science was a good thing. Shaking my head. Yes, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago, somewhere around it. No, no longer than that. Probably closer to 8 to 10 years ago is when I really got into web development. I started studying web development about 10, 11, maybe 12 years ago, somewhere around there. And then I got into it. And there were a lot of people that had a computer science degree. And what I found was that a lot of the hiring managers, they didn't really care about your computer science degree. Because they were like, "Look, that's not impressive," because they knew a bunch of people that didn't have any degrees that in many cases were better developers than the people coming out of school. Um, and and so that didn't really like that was the one industry that I could tell where having a degree might in some ways be a disadvantage because people were like, "Oh yeah, you have a degree, but you don't have any experience." No, no, like it was, and it was more pronounced than what I have observed in other communities where a degree might not always be the creme de la creme or whatever. I think I said that right. I hope I did, but if not, whatever. I don't have a college degree, so I probably would have learned that word better if I'd. Anyway, just shut up, Dale. Just shut up. Okay. All right. So where are we? Let's get back. All right. So let's get back. By the way, folks, if you enjoy this show, do me a favor. I want you to be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. If you're really serious out there, then go and hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. And by the way, I want you to support the show. So head on over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you could be a part of the show. There, I will engage directly with supporters of the show and we'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about on the show. Or maybe there's a response video that you'd like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. So make sure you go to libertydad.locals.com. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what is important to them in the context of, you guessed it, being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. So if you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes will air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for the dads. All right, let's get back to the rest of the show. Life stories. I've got tons of life stories, but that's the purpose of this memoir type show is to kind of rather than dig in deep and say, here's this fact and here's this data. And, I read this old report from, 1927, not doing so much of that, but more telling stories. to kind of give you an idea of why I believe the way I do. Because I think this is important because a lot of times, when I was growing up, the old people of my day, they would tell me about how they used to walk to school in the snow and the sleet and blah, blah, blah. But I never really heard, like, more of that, like, more of their life. So, it kind of felt like out of context, like someone was just wagging their finger at me and saying, "You know what? You should be grateful because you didn't have it as rough as I had it." And then they would just, like, tell me this selective story. And so what I try to do now is through the memoirs, tell you some stories about my life so that you get a better understanding of why I believe the way I do. And I think this will help. This goes further than just kind of, making fun of somebody who jumped on TikTok and made a silly video or, criticizing people. Like, I think we need to have more conversation so that it makes more sense. So that the younger people, if presumably some of you are younger, who are watching, you get an understanding. You go, "Oh, that's why he's saying that." He's just not, some old cantankerous guy that has a podcast. Wait a minute. No, I am. I am an old cantankerous guy with a podcast, but that's not why I am the way I am. So let me start with this first story. Many of you know that I used to be a youth director at a church. And it's funny because a lot of the conversations that you see today from the younger crowd, and they're like, "Hey, it's different now than when you were growing up." It's not like one phrase you might see frequently is, you know, "It's not the same world you grew up in." Well, guess what, young people? I said the exact same thing when I was younger to the older people. I was like, "It's not the same. It's different now." And guess what? When I was a youth director, I had a teenager who literally said the same thing to me. He was like, "Dude, it's not the same now. It's different. We were talking about school, and I don't remember the exact details, but he was complaining about something at school, and I was like, I was pushing back, and I was like, "Well, you just need to figure it out and stop whining, stop complaining." And he's like, "But dude, you just don't understand. It's different than now. You don't have this. You don't have this. You don't even have to deal with this. You didn't have." I'm like, "No, I didn't have to deal with those things. I just had to deal with other things. And the people before me, the generations before me, they didn't have to necessarily deal with the things I dealt with. They dealt with other stuff." So, like, for instance, if we're talking about the boomer millennial uh, debacle or debate or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, Boomers had to deal with, like, the aftermath. What's my graphic there? Let me look. Was it yeah, it was the boomers. They went through let me look at the time frame. The da, 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 where does it go here? Um, so looking back at that graphic here, the boomers, no, it would have been the silent generation that was dealing with the Great Depression. So looking at this the silent generation, who are in their like 70s or older now, roughly, um, that generation, they had to deal with the Great Depression. My generation and maybe millennials and, some of those folks, they had to deal with the 2008 financial crisis. So, like, yes, there are some differences that each generation has, and you're in a different place when you come to these. So, for instance, as I point out, when millennials were 20 and experiencing the 2008 financial crisis, I was 30. So you're struggling to necessarily get a foothold in life. I presumably, or many people my age, already had a foothold, right? But we're also not getting any younger. And so I actually have 10 fewer years than you did to recover from that. So whatever hit I took had an impact that was different than the hit that you took. And this applies in every generation. So if you're in your 20s and there's something that's bad that's happening in the economy, just know that everybody that's older than you is also dealing with it in some way. Now, maybe they're older and they're more established, and so they have a better time in terms of resolve. But because maybe they've got a better job, maybe they've accumulated a certain amount of wealth that can help them withstand that. But maybe not. This isn't the case for everybody. So everybody is dealing with this who's alive, and people are in different places, and they have in those different places give them a different perspective and a reality to deal with. But effectively, at the end of the day, it's really the same story, different generation. And the truth is, you're not going to like to hear this, but the truth is, you cannot bitch your way to success. Your generation's complaints are only new to you. I made many of the same complaints when I was young, as did those before me. Okay. All right. Now let me tell you a story because let's talk about some of the things that I faced when I was growing up. Because a lot of people look at me like, dude, you're 48, you're settled now, blah, blah, blah. I was, you don't have it hard like I had it. Oh, okay. So once upon a time when I was in my 20s, and now I'm going to pull two stories. One was in my 20s and one was in my 30s, roughly about the midway, somewhere around there. So in my 20s, I worked for a truck stop, and the truck stops have franchised like restaurants and stuff like that. Usually restaurants, but they have franchises within them. And so I worked at one that was close to my house, which probably by highway, I lived kind of close to the highway, so I could easily get on the highway within just a few minutes and travel down to the truck stop. And it was probably like a 15-minute drive highway. So not a big deal. So I worked there, and there was an opportunity at one of their other truck stops that was like an hour and a half down the road. And I tried to see, I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to get this management position. They had a Popeyes and a Pizza Hut. And I primarily worked at the Popeyes, but they kind of were joined together in a sense. They were like right next to each other, but they were franchised. And so you technically were an employee of the truck stop and you worked at one of the two. But you could easily bounce back and forth. Um, and so I worked my tail off to try to get a management position. So much so that I would sometimes open and close back to back. Now, what that means is I would open the restaurant in the morning and I would close it in the evening. And sometimes I would close it in the evening and then open in the morning. And mind you, I lived an hour and a half away by highway, not an hour and a half, on a good day or a bad day, depending on traffic. Um, Hour and a half flat out by highway. Now, if there was traffic, then things just got even worse. So, what that meant was if I was closing and getting out there, and I don't remember the times because this was in my 20s, I'm almost 50 now. So, like, bear with me on the memory. But we would close somewhere around maybe 11 o'clock or something like that, and then open at like in the morning, like, I don't know, 7 or 8, something like that. And so an hour and a half home and an hour and a half back is 3-hour drive. And so I would get nervous because I was like, well, what if I'm so tired? What if I don't wake up in time and I can't make it there? And I was trying to get this management job. So I slept in my car on multiple occasions and I would tell the morning crew that would come in, I would be like, hey, just come knock on my window and I'll come in and I'll go to work. Right. Like this is what I did in my 20s. And at one point, um, for this very same job, I actually moved temporarily and I was living in like what they call an efficiency. So somebody took like this motel. You've seen the motels like on the side of a road and they've got a whole bunch of like basically just rooms stacked together next to each other. And if you go into them, it's literally like a bedroom and a bathroom. I rented one like, there was one where they were renting efficiencies where you could actually live. So it was a motel turned like mini almost apartment complex. And so I rented one just so that I would have somewhere to stay. And it was like it was not luxurious, let's just say that. And so for this job, I slept in my car. There's a couple times I think I slept on the floor of somebody's house that lived nearby. So I went through some great measures to try to get this management position, which I never got, unfortunately. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I actually never did get that job because they never intended to give it to me. They led me along, and then finally, new management came in, and then flat out told me he was like, "Look, I'm aware that you are trying to, prove yourself for this management position, and that the old management had promised that if you proved yourself, they would they might give it to you." And he said, "But I'm under no obligation to follow." He said something like, "I'm under no obligation to meet their commitments," or something like that. He basically said, "It's not happening." So I ended up having to quit. Right, but and like this was unfair. Right, like Ideally, in a proper world, a company will not abuse you like that and let you work these ridiculous hours for the hopes of getting something that they never intended to give you. So, like a waste of time, all this time. And well, that's just the way things work. It's not right, but it's what happens. And I promise you, young folks, I'm not the only one with a story like that. Now you might think, okay, well, maybe you were a little bit less wise, and by the time you got a little older, things got better because you could pick out this stuff, and maybe people treated you better when you're older. Well, not always that either. So here's another story. When I was about 35, I was working in the capacity of an industrial engineer. Basically, I dealt with processes for a fastener distribution company. So I would go out to their customers, to production lines, and I would help identify opportunities where we could improve the processes for delivering fasteners like nuts, bolts, and screws and stuff like that. It was a great job. But at the same time, I had met my now wife, and we were living in Charlotte, and she worked for a company that was based here in Jacksonville. They gave her a new opportunity, which brought her to Jacksonville. And so then we initially were like, all right, well, what's our plan to stay together? And at the time, I was like, I'm studying web development, and I think I'm going to go to school to get a little bit of a degree just to kind of help me out, maybe network and meet some people, stuff like that. So that was my initial plan. But then the plan had to change, and I ended up moving down to Jacksonville so that we could get married. And so in doing so, I spent basically a year studying on my own. We totally scrapped the plans. And then when I was ready, I was like, all right, I'm going to go get this job. By the way, right before I moved down, I interviewed at Bank of America for one of their teams, their software development teams. I knew a guy, he got me an interview, and I totally failed that. I mean, I bombed it. I might as well have walked in drunk. Like it was about that bad. It was terrible. It was awful. But it was a great learning experience, an unfortunate one, but a great one. Okay, so so I learned web development now, right? Now I'm ready. I'm ready to I'm ready just to build all kind of web apps. So I reach out to somebody that's in this meetup group that I'm involved in. And I said, "Hey, man, do you know anybody that's hiring?" And he said, "Actually, I am." And he said, "Let me," and I had already been talking to him, because he was part of the meetup group. And so he knew me a little bit. And he's like, "I didn't realize you were looking." He goes, "Why don't I get you an interview?" It's awesome. This is great. Now he was working for a startup company, a small startup company. And they told me up front, they said, "Look, we want to hire you, but we're going to be honest. Right now, we can't pay you very much because we're a startup and we don't have a lot of funds. We're trying to build, establish ourselves." But I looked at it as this is a foot in the door. It's going to lead to better opportunities. So I took the $12 an hour. Okay. Because $12 an hour was better than, guess what? $0 an hour. Not to mention, it gives me work experience in the field that I'm trying to get into. Work experience, networking experience, all this stuff. So I get in there and things are going pretty well. They get bought by another company. And that company came in. And at the time, I was kind of balancing between doing web development work and mostly QA work. And so the company that bought them came in and said, "All right, well, you're doing mostly QA work. So what we're going to do is here's an offer letter for you to be QA. And then here's the pay. They were going to offer me 42,000 a year. And I was like, all right, yeah, now I'm in a bigger company and I'm getting a little bit more experience. And they said, and what we're going to do is we're going to put you in this, this informal program and bring you to a developer status. And then everything will change for you. You'll get developer pay. You'll get the developer title. You'll be doing developer work. That's awesome. Now, the mistake I made was not getting it in writing. That was the mistake I made. And it was a huge mistake because here's what happened. After a year or two, I was like, "Hey, can I get a pay increase? I'm actually now doing developer work all the time. I'm not doing QA work anymore. I'm doing developer work. Let me get some of that pay." And they were like, and they started making excuses. They were like, "Well, you had this problem. You weren't able to, you didn't understand this thing." And I was like, "I have delivered every project that has been asked of me. Not a single one did I not deliver on. And on a couple of them, I had to go out of my way because I was in a little bit over my head. And I reached out to like some of my developer friends and I was like, yo, you got to help me because I'm struggling here. And so my friends would come and help me. Right. And at one point I did the research and I determined that the pay that I was making as a developer, even an entry level developer, they could have paid me 50% more and I would still be under the market pay. This is what I mean. This is literally this is 35. So like I got treated poorly, right? And at one point, I told the director over all the developers, I said I was kind of mad. And when I get mad, I just tell you what I think, and I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I was in I was in a not an interview. I was in a meeting with him. It was like a regular like monthly meeting or something like that. I was in a meeting and we were talking about it, and I was like, "Look, you guys are getting a service that you're not paying for, and that's unacceptable." Literally what I told him. And he was like, he said, "I appreciate you telling me that. I will pass that along to so and so, who was the CEO of the company." It was still a relatively small company, but much bigger than the one I was in, that I had started with. And so then I was like, "Oh," in my mind, I was like, "Oh, did I just mess up?" So anyway, out of that, I met a guy who I'm now really good friends with, and he ended up leaving and going to a different company, and he brought me with him. You see what I mean about networking? Like when it was time for me to leave, I left and I did some other things. I was trying some other things. And then I was talking to my friend and I was like, yeah, I'm looking for work. And he's like, I could use somebody like you on my team. And I was like, yeah. And he brought me on board and I got a much, much better pay, much better. Okay. So like these are the kind of things that happen. This is why when people say, "Well, that job's beneath me." Well, I could have said $12 an hour is beneath me. But had I said that, then the chain of events would not have played out. And I would not have been able to get that job where I was making much better pay and had a much better experience, far better. Okay. That happened as a result of taking a $12 an hour job. As a result of getting paid $42,000 a year, that was significantly under the market pay for the work that I was doing, even as what you would call a junior developer. And now, does it always play out that way? Not necessarily. Sometimes you just have to leave and you take your experience with you, and that experience helps you out in the future, but it otherwise doesn't seem to provide any benefit. At a minimum, though, the benefit is always, always work experience because I've been there in that hot seat trying to explain why I have a 3-month gap in my employment. I've had like not recently, but that's like when I was in my 20s. I had that happen a few times where they were like, "Why you? What happened with these 3 months? Explain that." And then you're like trying to figure out like, uh, and you're trying to come up with some crazy like, "Yeah, I was really trying to work," or, "My mom got sick," or maybe you didn't lie about it, or some people probably did. But the idea being like, you're struggling to try to figure out how to tell them, because they want a really good answer for why you weren't employed. And a really good answer isn't, "I couldn't find a job." Because from an employer perspective, they're just simply gonna be like, "Well, I saw a hiring sign down the road. Why didn't you take that job?" Right? Like, that happened, and I've had that question asked for me. And you cannot say, "Because I don't wanna answer your phone calls, Bart." Like, that's not gonna work. Why do you have a gap in your resume? "I didn't wanna answer Bart's phone calls." Oh, so there's certain work you don't wanna do, and you'd rather be unemployed than do that work. Hmm, and then your resume gets put to the bottom. Why? Because nobody wants an employee like that. And it's a rough world. I'm 48. Again, this happened in my 20s. And it happened to people before me. My mother told me very similar stories, right? When she was young, she was in her 20s in the 70s, right? And she told me same stories, when she was in her 20s and 30s. Same thing happened to her, right? Like this is not new. All right. Today, I would say that I'm not rich, but we're doing well for ourselves. But just to add on and to let people know some of my experiences that I had, I have been poor. Here are some highlights. Um, One time I had I was in the National Guard, and my National Guard unit was a couple hours away, and so I would go there for the weekend, for a Saturday and a Sunday, and I did not have about, I think at the time it was roughly like $90 for a hotel room. I did not have $90 for a hotel room. So you know where I slept? In a homeless shelter. Like like I was in the military serving our nation, and I had to sleep in a homeless shelter because I didn't have the roughly $90 to afford a hotel for the night. Now, I only had to do it once because, I ended up talking with some people at the unit, and they would say, "Well, why don't we just let you stay here? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let you stay here, but you have to be here by, like 6 o'clock, and then we'll open the doors at 7. So between those times, you're locked in. You can't get out. So make sure you have everything you need." And that's what I did. So I'd have, and there was, at that time, there wasn't internet, I don't believe, to have. So like I had to, and I didn't have cell phones and all these and tablets and all this cool stuff. Like I didn't have a laptop. I mean, I couldn't even afford a $90 hotel room. So like I brought books. I had to read books all night long. Right. Like that was how poor I was. But I did sleep in a homeless shelter. I've went without meals because I couldn't afford them. In fact, in some cases, when I was in my 18, 19, 20, in some instances, I actually would scam restaurants out of food. So my buddies and I would have this. We would do this thing. Should I tell you? I'm going to tell you. Hopefully, it doesn't work, and don't do this because it's stealing and it's wrong. But I'm just telling you what I did. What I did to survive before I got to now, where I'm far far better than where I was. I'm in a far better place. So what we would do is we would call at McDonald's at, say, 1:30, maybe 2 o'clock, and we would say, "Hey, I came through during the lunch rush and I ordered this meal and I had to get back to work and you guys got it all wrong." And they would say, "Oh, we're so sorry. We apologize. Please come in and have a free burger. What's your name? Your name is, Daniel. Okay, Daniel, come in. Let us know you're asking for, Jennifer, the manager. She'll take care of you." So I would go in there and they'd apologize, like, "Sorry, sir, we didn't, it was the lunch rush, blah, blah, blah." We knew what we were doing, and we didn't go through the lunch rush. We just made it up. Or we would call up a pizza place and we would complain about a pizza that we ordered maybe the night before, and we had asked for like no, no meat. We're allergic to meat or something like that. And there was some meat on it, and we got really, really sick. And we wanted to call, you know, earlier, but we couldn't because we had to recover. And they would give us a free pizza. Like we did this all the time because we didn't have any money, right? Me and some of my friends. We were that poor that we would just scam restaurants. Now, again, don't do that. I'm not saying that like it was okay or it was a moral thing to do, because I was hungry. I'm just telling you, like, yeah, I've been there. Like I said earlier, I slept on friends' floors. Here's a really, let me gross you out. I used to smoke cigarettes when I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And again, same time frame. So poor that I was, basically stealing from restaurants. So what we would sometimes do, this is so gross. You guys are gonna be grossed out. We would actually get used cigarette butts out of the ashtrays, out of like public places that still were kind of long. So there's like a little bit of cigarette to smoke. And we would smoke those. We would pull out the filter, I think, and then, just smoke it like that, just to have a cigarette. Like, I couldn't like, I was smoking and couldn't even afford my own terrible habit. So then I would basically be a poor person digging through the trash for it. So gross. Definitely don't do that. I filed bankruptcy because I got fired from a good job, a good paying job, and then I was unable to pay the debt that I had accrued because of my poor money management, right? It's like I've had some of these experiences. Now, here's the really fun part. I don't have a degree. I have no college degree. And in my early years, I had no particularly marketable skill. So let me tell you something. You might complain about a mountain of school debt with a fresh education, but no job. Well, let me tell you this: a mountain of school debt. with a fresh education to offer a company pays the bills about as well as having no debt, no skill, and no formal education. So like again, similar problem, different situation, but I managed. How did I manage? Pulled myself up by my bootstraps and figure it out. There's an economist named George Reisman, and he's got an essay, and I don't remember the name of the essay, but in there, he points out that there's no scarcity of opportunity, but there are opportunities for which you are not prepared for. So, for instance, if the local bank said, "Hey, we're looking for a new branch manager," well, that's an opportunity, but I am not prepared for that opportunity right now. I've never worked in a bank ever. So I don't know anything about banking. So I am, it's like they say, luck favors the prepared. Well, I'm not prepared to have that fall into my lap as a matter of luck. So therefore, the only option that I have is to find something else. But if I have no marketable skills, if I have nothing other than a work history of basically doing menial tasks, then I don't have much to offer. So therefore, all of those opportunities that may be available are off limits to me. So the answer is to go and develop some skills however you can. Let me tell you another story. When I was young, I worked at Fazoli's. And this is, again, a lot of these are when I was like early 20s, late teens. So I worked at Fazoli's, and this was when I was in my restaurant phase. I did a lot of restaurant work when I was younger. And I was trying to climb the ranks. And because I was like, all right, I'm going to start out at the low level and then I'm going to get up to the high level. So here's what I did. Here's a clever way that I acquired skill. They would say, "Oh, we need somebody for this position tomorrow. Is anybody available?" And I'm available. I can come and do that job. Right. And they'd be like, "Okay, good." And they'd write my name down. I'd show up the next day and they were like, "Oh, so glad you're here because so and so called off or whatever." Right. And I'd say, "How do you do this job?" And they were like, "Wait a minute, you don't know how to do this?" And I was like, "No, but I was available." Well, now they're stuck with me. Like they had no choice. So they trained me, gave me a crash course, said, "Good luck." And, I did fairly well when I was working at Fazoli's for a young guy. But this is the kind of attitude that I had. I just was like, all right, let me seize every opportunity that I can. Let me milk it like the I'm gonna take every turnip that I can find in the game of life here, and I'm gonna do my best to squeeze out a drop of blood. And then I'm gonna take that drop of blood and I'm going to run with that. And I'm gonna make I'm really butchering this analogy, but you get my gist. I would just simply seek out any opportunity and exploit it to my benefit. And that is what you have to do, right? Let me read you something here. This comes from Matt Walsh. He weighed in on this, and I think it was pretty instructive. So let me pull this up on the screen for you guys, and then I'll read it for those who are not available. It's a little bit long, but I think he addresses it very well. And then we're going to close the show. This is my problem. Okay, let me back up. So he's responding to this tweet that says the reason why jobs are worth it is because you could afford a home in a nice high trust society and support a family. Why do it now? I will not be reduced to an effing serf. So this is basically this attitude of, hey, there are certain things that are beneath me. I'm not going to do them. And once upon a time, a job could do all these things. And it's true, right? Like none of this is not true. But the fact of the matter is, um, we had our same complaints when we were young. I roommated with people with friends because I didn't have the money to pay the rent by myself. So I had to roommate with people. Right? These were realities, and we just had to figure things out. So here's what Matt Walsh responds. He says, "This is my problem with this whole debate. Yes, I acknowledge that young people face serious challenges starting out in the workforce. Yes, I agree that we are importing foreigners to take American jobs, and that is hideously evil and unfair. I don't quite agree with that statement. Conversation for another day. Once we've agreed on that, what then? What is a young adult supposed to actually do tomorrow? What is your plan? Complaining about it incessantly on Twitter is not a plan. Calling for policy solutions is fine. And I agree that we should work on those. Interjection here. We've been doing that. We've been complaining, providing policy ideas, and then seeking to work on those ever since I was born, ever since before I was born. This is not a new thing. It's been happening. Again, same issue, different situation, different generations. All right, continuing on. But what about tomorrow? What is the demoralized young person supposed to actually do in his life tomorrow? I say that he must get up in spite of all of it, get the best job he possibly can, and work hard as he can to achieve what he can. He has a difficult road, far from the most difficult compared to the vast majority of humans who have ever lived on Earth, but difficult. Let me add to that. Once upon a time, our ancestors were worried about being eaten by a lion or worried about eating, right? Like civilization has come a long way, and humans have faced much more difficult issues and defeated them over the course of human history. So the fact that you're struggling to find a job, it's difficult, yes. And it's unfortunate, yes. But actually have it way better than many people that have come before you. Now, the lion and all that, that's a bit exaggerated, not really exaggerated, but that's an extreme example to illustrate the point. But remember, people went through the Great Depression and they survived, right? Like they had to because time marches on. Let's continue. But he still has to get up and walk. What else would we have him do? My attitude is condemned by some right wingers on this site whose doomerism has now descended to a point where they will call you a traitor for suggesting that a young man has any agency at all in his life. They want to hear nothing but misery, porn, and hopelessness. Anything else makes you a boomer cuck. Apologies for the language here, folks. That's because they don't actually give the slightest crap about the young people they pretend to be speaking for. This guy's quote solution, which I've seen repeated in different forms countless times on this site, is to just not work at all. Jobs aren't worth it, he says. And think about it. That's the clip that I played the young lady, right? She had 2 degrees. I believe some people were mentioning online that one of them was in criminal justice and the other one was in psychology or something like that. But regardless, she didn't want to work at a call center. It was beneath her. No, I don't want to answer phone calls for you, Bart. Okay, well, guess what, young lady? I'm 48. And if I fall on hard times, I will totally answer phone calls for Bart because I've experienced what can happen when you do that. Number one, it gives you a record that employers love to see. Number two, it introduces you to people and skills that you might not have otherwise, which allow you to seize that opportunity that you come across next. If you do nothing, you are not prepared. You are no more prepared. Like, let's put it this way. Let's say I fall on hard times and I'm a 25-year-old. I'm just out of college. I can't find a job. Nobody wants to hire me for the degree that I've just acquired, and I'm really upset about it. Okay. Well, great. Guess what? If I do nothing, if I don't take any job, then in 6 months, I have the same exact skill set that I was that didn't lend to getting me a job. Then in 6 months, I have the same exact skill set as I did prior that didn't lend to me getting a job, right? That doesn't work for me. And I'm not going to allow that as an excuse to say, oh, it's below you. No, earning money, honestly, is never below you. Okay. This guy's solution, let me see, where was I? Instead, he will live off the government of or his parents. But that's not how you escape being a serf. That's how you become one. You are volunteering for a life of failure and servitude. So again, I ask, what is your plan? What are you going to do tomorrow? Some of you like to mock the bootstraps mentality, but you have given young people precisely zero alternatives. You have not given them any idea of what they should do tomorrow. And to me, that is the most important and useful question here. There's a reason why so many people in this discussion would rather skip over it. So Matt is entirely correct. Okay. Like that's not working is not a solution. And from the experience of many of us now olds, Many of us understand that sometimes you do got to take something that's quote unquote beneath you so that you can get something that you want that's better. As my mom would say, I made a joke, I think it was the other day on Twitter. I said, once upon a time, I was going out to look for jobs. And my mom was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "It's my resume." And there was like two of them. And she was like, "No." She goes, "You go and you print like 20 of them. And you start at one end of that complex, and you drop off a resume to every single store." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to work at every single store." And she said, "Whoa, whoa." She goes, "Beggars can't be choosers." She said, "You get a job first, then you can be picky. You get income, you get money to pay your bills, then you can figure out where you want to work and how to get that job." She was like, "But you need money at the end of the day." Now, I'll understand if a certain job maybe is out of bounds because, maybe it costs you money, right? Like you might say, well, okay, DL, if I take this particular job over here, which is an hour and a half drive, when I've calculated it, I'll actually be losing money and I'll be in the negative. Okay, fine. That job is out. I get it. But otherwise, you find opportunities and you exploit the hell out of them. That is how you get to a place where all of us olds are, where we can sit back and say, back in my day. That's how you do it. Okay, let's get to some comments. I got to get out of here. So let's see. Where are my comments thing here? And bam. Let's see what else we got for comments in here. I got a few. So let's take a look. Where's my There we are. All right. So let me see if I can go back up here. I'll change my name. No, 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 don't change your name. It's fine. It's all good. I love it. I'm just trying to have a little bit of fun. Don't mind me. Take it with a grain of salt. Do not change your name at all. Yes, join Liberty Dad at libertydad.locals.com. Let's see. It would be better. Kegela says it would be better if people did not lie or cheat, I believe. It would be. Unfortunately, it's not the world we live in. So we have to learn to adapt to that world and whatever it throws at us. Let's see. Yet another list of reasons why minimum wage laws are bad. Yes, maybe I'll do a show on that and kind of connect it because yes, minimum wage laws are very harmful for people that are on the struggle and having trouble finding something. So, and there's a long conversation to be had, which we don't have time for now. Okay, let's see what else we got. That Liberty lady says, "Girl with 2 degrees could become a business owner if she is quote beneath what other employers are offering. I also don't have college degrees. Had a cleaning biz for 20 years. Now starting a virtual assistant biz." Yes, that is true. Like, and especially today. Like, let me point out that today we live in a world where, in some ways, you have things as a young person that I didn't have available to me. Right? Like there was no Uber that I could just take up when I was young. Like there was no what's that other one where they drop off food? Can't think of it now at the moment. But the service where you order your food and somebody brings you your McDonald's, that didn't exist. I couldn't do that. The grocery store one, any of those little side hustles that somebody has set up and all you need is like a car or be able to be mobile and then you can do the job and get a little extra dollars on the side. That didn't exist. We had to make those up, right? Like when I was young, and I hate to play the back in my day, but this is basically what it amounts to. Back in my day, I had to like mow lawns or shovel snow or do those are the kind of job. I had to go and knock on the door, but like, "Hey, can I, shovel your snow for 20 bucks?" That's how that's what the side hustles that I had. One side hustle I actually did have that I made up. I was working at Rent a Center. I ended up getting fired, long story, but I got fired, and, but I had some technical background to me, so I went to the one of the Rent a Centers, was it Rent a Center or maybe a competing store? I don't know, but I went to one of those rental companies, and I said, "Hey, I wanna try to fix some of your equipment." So that was my side hustle, and they were like, "Oh, yeah?" And they're like, "All right." And so, like, they paid me to fix some of their equipment, some of their stuff. Um, and I didn't some of it was a little bit too much and, it didn't really pan out as well as I had hoped, but it was an opportunity that I exploited. And, that attitude, not the job itself, the attitude is what got me to where I am. The attitude of, "Hey, This job, I'm not doing this job. Fine. Go start a cleaning business. Okay. You get tired of the cleaning business? Fine. Go start a virtual assistant business. Go find something. But you have to look around and say, what can I do? And you have to have a frame of mind, the mindset of, I'm going to make it work. And I have never really been worried about losing my job. I mean, I don't want to lose my job, any job, but I've always kind of been of the attitude, I will figure it out. And I've had that attitude ever since the first of 2 times that I've ever been fired in my entire life. When I was like 19, I got brought in. I was working at a distribution company, for groceries. It was kind of like an Amazon warehouse, and they brought me in. They said, "You're a few percent under our standard. We got to let you go." And then the manager clasped his hands like this, put his elbows on the table, put his chin on his hands, looked me square in the eye, and said, "What are you going to do now?" I was like, and I was kind of dumbfounded. I was like, "Go find another job?" Like, I was like, "What else am I gonna do? I'm gonna go work, dummy." Right? So that's why I am the way I am, because I've had these experiences, and hopefully these experiences, can be shared with other people, and they can say, "Wow, okay, the olds did have it rough in their own way, and if I just have the right attitude, I can be like them one day too." All right, folks, thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel or my Rumble channel if you prefer. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. It helps out the algorithm. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.